Hello, my name is Ryan Harper, and I'm the host of Reporter's Notebook. And today in studio, we have Sarah Gray Barr. Sarah Gray, how you doing today?
I am hanging in there. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for asking. Now, I know yesterday your day was pretty hectic, and you was always on the move. So what can you tell us about the stories that you did yesterday?
So yesterday, I spent most of my day in New Bern, all of my day in New Bern, actually, until I got to come back home to Greenville. Both stories were with CarolinaEast, which is the health system in the area. The first story I did was about a dementia task force, specifically a dementia-friendly employee task force. And the second story I did was a blanket giveaway for cancer patients.
Now, with these two stories, have you ever worked with CarolinaEast before?
I've actually never worked CarolinaEast, which is what made yesterday kind of special. It's I consider it a milestone because for me, whenever I get to talk to new people or I make new connections that ultimately lead to other stories, I count that as a win in my book. I think sometimes what we forget is that to find stories and to connect with people, it really just takes you reaching out and saying hello. And so a couple weeks ago, I reached out to the information team, the public relations team at CarolinaEast, and a few weeks later, I got a response saying, hey, we have this dementia-friendly employee task force. Why don't you come on down, do a story about it? And I said, sounds like a plan. When can I come? And we set up Monday. And then they happened to mention that there was a blanket giveaway going on for cancer patients, and Riverside Subaru was partnering with the Lymphoma and Leukemia Society to pass out these like warm Sherpa, like plush blankets that can be like folded into pillows. They're very cool, actually. They Riverside Subaru gave them to the cancer center because a lot of times when people are going through treatment, they get cold, and it's kind of cold in those facilities.
Yeah. Now, for those who didn't have a chance to look at one of the stories yet for the blanket story, I was watching it earlier today, and, you actually happened to be talking to somebody who was suffering from cancer who were putting on the show. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Sometimes you don't realize how closely connected a person is with your story until you start interviewing them. For example, my goal, since it was with Riverside Subaru and then also CarolinaEast, my plan was to talk to someone from CarolinaEast and someone from Subaru. And I started talking with the general manager of Subaru, and he told me that the blanket giveaway especially hit close to home because he had recently been diagnosed with cancer, and he had been at CarolinaEast's cancer facility earlier that day receiving treatment. And it kind of took me aback for a moment. And I realized that if I really wanted to make what he was saying stand out, then I just needed him for the piece. I still interviewed someone from CarolinaEast, but I think we forget oftentimes how our stories and the people we interview, just how closely intertwined they are. Because when I interviewed him, I had no idea he was diagnosed with cancer recently and was undergoing treatment. And it's just special the way these things sometimes just overlap or just happen to happen. And for me, at least, I consider that part of the magic of journalism. Not to sound cheesy.
That sounds great. Now, as far as your other story, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I know you spent a lot of time there, and it's pretty interesting. Can you tell us about that?
Whenever I make a trip to New Bern, I try to make it worth my while. I spoke with one of the organizers. Her name was Rebecca Skinner. She kind of heads up the program, and she was telling me about how employees came together in 2020 to try to form this dementia-friendly employee task force because New Bern does have an aging population, and Alzheimer's and dementia are associated. Their disease is associated with aging, so it makes sense to put together this task force to A, help patients who are suffering with dementia during this time of transition, but B, also help the family members and the loved ones. Some of the items that were spoken about are the busy bags, and due to the nature of reporting and TV, we are constrained by our time limits. So one thing I didn't get to talk about were these arm bracelets that were knitted. And what they do is that they actually cover the IV ports that people get when they're like undergoing treatment, and they have like ribbons and buttons and things for the patients to mess around with so they're not trying to pull the needles out of their arms. So I didn't get to include that in my story, but I thought that was something interesting that y'all might have wanted to know.
Nice. Now, it seems like you had quite the eventful day yesterday. So is there anything coming up this week that you have your eyes on as far as covering for a story?
I know that the Ronald McDonald House of Eastern North Carolina, the one here in Greenville, is actually celebrating 36 years. 36 years. Next week, the Ronald McDonald House that's based in ECU Health in the Children's Hospital, that's celebrating 10 years, either next week or the week after. So I'm going to try to do a story about that. But this week is the 36th birthday of the Ronald McDonald House, the actual house. And I'm hoping to do a story that is tomorrow. Hoping to do a quick little story. I already have my footage shot, so I really hope the producers pick it, because I also already have the interview. So I'm really going to like push for that story tomorrow.
Right. Well, thank you so much for the information, Sarah Gray. And where can people find you if they want to send you stories or any updates?
Hey, the best way to reach me is email. So that is S as in Sarah, B as in boy, A as in apple, R as in Romeo, R as in Romeo at WNCT.com. You can also message me on Instagram at Sarah Gray Barr. That's just my full name. Or you can message me on my Facebook page, not my personal account, because for some reason I never see them. And that is just at Sarah Gray Barr.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today's episode of Reporter's Notebook, and can't wait to have you back.
Thank you for having me.